Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. Ms. Coakley, would you call the roll for us?
Ms. Hines?
Here.
Mr. Green? Here. Mr. Derman? Here. Mr. Loop? Here. Mr. Harrell? Here. Mr. Nation? Here. Mrs. Richardson?
On her way.
Mr. Winkler?
Here.
Mrs. Drucker?
Here.
Mr. Bittencourt? Here. Mrs. Lamy? Here. Mr. Hersey? Here. Mr. Bro? Here. Mr. Kuzan? Here. Mrs. Page? Here.
Thank you very much. Would you please rise and join us in the invocation and pledge led by Mr. Nation?
Let us pray. Gracious Lord, as we begin a new school year, we ask that you direct this board as well as our teachers and all our administrators, that they will be guided by you, and that all we say and do will bring honor and glory to you as we serve the children and the parents of this parish. And this we pray in your Son's name. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to thank you all for being here for our August 8th meeting. It's been a very busy week at the school system, throughout the system and at the schools, with everyone getting ready for the beginning of school tomorrow. I know that there's a lot of excited teachers and supervisors and principals and the central office and most of all our students looking forward to tomorrow morning. Our bus drivers, cafeteria, everyone. So it'll be a great start, and we're looking forward to it. Tonight, first on our agenda is recognition of visitors. Does any board member have anyone they'd like to recognize? Ms. Lamy.
I would just like to recognize Ms. Sue back there. She is principal of my school in Wakefield, and I was the principal.
Thank you, Ms. Lamy. All right, if no one else has a recognition, we'll move on to our next item, which is announcement of administrative appointments. Mr. Foles.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. Board members, we have two appointments tonight that I want to introduce to the board. First of all, happy to introduce to you the new principal of Fontainebleau Junior High, Mr. Michael Astigue.
Got me. Thank you, Mr. Foles. Thank you, President Hines and board members, for appointing me to this position. I just wanted to thank Mr. Vetrano for everything he's taught me. Without him, I'm kind of learning that already. It's a lot of stuff there. But with everything I've learned from him, it's going to be good. I'd like to thank my wife, my family for being there for me, and my wife for being there for me the last couple of nights specifically. And I just wanted to thank you all again just for giving me the opportunity to lead such a good school, great school, and a great community. I look forward to leading them there, and also, working alongside with the feeder schools just to build that school learning community up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, Ms. Hines, Mr. Astigue's new assistant principal that will be working alongside him is Mr. Brandon McCullough.
Good evening, Superintendent Foles, board members, and staff. I'd just like to say thank you also for this opportunity. I'm going back to where I grew up. This is my community that I grew up in, live in, and I'm very excited about being able to join that at Fontainebleau Junior High School. It's been an exciting journey. I was at 5th Ward Junior High, and I'd be remiss not to thank Mr. Ufnak and Ms. Simmons there and the rest of the 5th Ward Junior High staff. That 1 week there was a great learning experience, but it was also just leaving there. I feel like family there, And I would also like to thank all the people that I've worked with over the years. from Mr. Vetrano at Fountain Blue High School, Mr. Percy at Slidell High School, and the rest of my colleagues at both schools for being able to help me to get to this position and grow at both schools. And then lastly, my family. I couldn't be here without them, my wife, my kids, and my parents. And I'm looking forward to serving the community. Thank you.
Congratulations. Those are two. Yes, yes. Board members too as well. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I also want to introduce Mrs. Jennifer Muntz, who is our new food service director. She was not there the other night, so she's here now. She's hit the ground running, and we're proud of her and happy to have her as part of our school system. Jennifer.
Thank you, Mr. Folse. And I know that these new administrators and new supervisor are hitting the ground running, and we really appreciate that. All right, our next item is special presentation. Superintendent Folse has that presentation to make.
Thank you, Ms. Heinz. Board members, you know, not too often do we get the opportunity to present to an employee a 50-year of service pin. So I wanted to take that special occasion and do that before the board tonight. So tonight is certainly my honor and privilege to present Mr. Pete Jabby, our Associate Superintendent, with his 50-year service pin to this school system. Mr. Jabby started in our school system in 1968. I did the math. I was 7 years old at the time when he started in our school system. And then he was a teacher at Shataima, Boyette, and Bayou Lacombe. And then in 1978, he became assistant principal at Carolyn Park. From there, he became principal at Brock Elementary. From there, he became principal at Slidell Junior High School. And in April of 1983, he became supervisor of personnel and human resources. In March of 2007, he was named assistant superintendent of human resources. And I'm proud to say that since June of 2013, he has served as my associate superintendent. Tonight is my honor to present to him, thank him for his many, many years of service and commitment to the students and the employees of this school system with his 50-year service pin, to my dear friend, Mr. Pete Jabby.
I hope that
Thank you so much, Mr. Post. It's very special.
I hope that 50-year pin is big.
Right.
Or at least the 50 years is
Right,
big, so we
right,
can read it.
right.
Congratulations, Mr. Javia. We appreciate you so much. All right, we'll now move on to public comments. We did not have anyone sign up for 5 minutes, so we'll move on to 3 minutes. We had one person sign up for 3 minutes. That's Mr. Jaron Narcisse.
You got it? All right. I want to say, first of all, thank you for having me. A lot of people in this room know me from growing up. Some know me from my teaching career. Some know me because I'm running for office. Some know me from the rec board. I'm known in many different areas, but tonight I want to talk to you guys about the best kept secret on the North Shore, and that's the Bayou Lacombe Cardinals minor league football. We're a nonprofit organization, and we basically were formed 4 years ago to give guys who basically didn't get that opportunity to go to college an extra opportunity to get life development. We're partnered with North Shore Tech to give low cost of free education. Most teams like us for semi-pro football or minor league football, they charge $350 to $250 to play on the team. We charge 10 hours of community service. We literally want our guys to get out there and get active in their communities and be a force in the community. With that said, my main goal today is to work toward an avenue from St. Tammany Parish Schools into this program for the behavioral guys or the guys who didn't make it into college or the academically challenged. Through the North Shore Tech program, we provide that opportunity to make up credits or get a high set or things of that nature. For some athletes, this could be a secondary path toward an opportunity. Any questions, comments, anything that you would like to know?
Well, we appreciate knowing about it this evening, you know, and the information that you provided to us. So I think we'll peruse that, and if we have any questions, we'll get back to you.
All righty, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here with us. All right, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is approval of the minutes from the special meeting held on July 11th, 2019. Do I have a motion to accept those minutes? Mr. Breaux? And I have a second, please, Ms. Page? All right, the second from Ms. Page. Do we have any comments from board members on those July 11th minutes? Any comments from the public? If not, would you please cast your ballot? We have 12 yeas, 2 abstentions, so those minutes pass. Our next item is approval of the minutes from the regular meeting held on July 18th, 2019. Do I have a motion to accept those minutes? A motion by Mr. Loop and a second by Ms. Drucker. Do we have any comments on those minutes from July 18th from board members? Any from the public? If not, would you please vote? We have 14 yeas. Minutes passed. Our next item is appropriate retirement resolutions for the following certificated personnel subsequent to July 18th, 2019. Mr. Jabbia.
Thank you, Ms. Heinz. Yvette S. Floyd, Bonnie Cole Elementary, 29.96 years, 27.10 years in St. Tammany Parish. Denise G. Holman, Florida Avenue Elementary, 41 years, 34 years in St. Tammany Parish. Kelly C. Grunditz, Florida Fontainebleau Junior High, 32.81 years, 31.81 years in St. Tammany Parish. Rebecca S. Miller, Harrison Curriculum Center, 24.94 years, all in St. Tammany Parish. Kimberly C. Larsh, Lakeshore High, 22 years, all in St. Tammany Parish. Deborah R. Boudreau, St. Tammany Junior High, 16.63 years, all in St. Tammany Parish.
I have a motion by Mr. Kuzan. How about a second, Mr. Nation? All right, do we have any comments from board members? Any comments from the public? Would everyone please vote? We have 14 yeas. Our next item is appropriate retirement resolutions for the following non-certificated personnel subsequent to July 18th, 2019. Mr. Jabbia.
Thank you. Norma R. Weary, Covenant High, 28.38 years, all in St. Tammany Parish. Stacy T. Courtney, Folsom Junior High, 29.91 years, all in St. Tammany Parish. Peggy M. Murray, Mandeville Junior High, 11.96 years, all in St. Tammany Parish. Emma J. Brown, Pineview Middle, 21.18 years, all in St. Tammany Parish. Salvador A. DiMaggio, Transportation Center, 28.65 years, all in St. Tammany Parish.
Do I have a motion to accept those? A motion by Mr. Derman, second, Mr. Winkler. Do we have any comments from board members? Any comments from the public? Would you please vote? We have 15 yeas. That motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Jabbia. Our next item is certification of board members Certification of board members Matthew E. Green, Elizabeth B. Heinz, Michael J. Derman, Stephen J. Loop, Brandon Harrell, Michael C. Nation, Shelta J. Richardson, Michael E. Winkler, Ronald Betancourt, Tammy Lamy, Richard Hersey, James Bro, Dennis S. Kuzan, and Lisa M. Page in completion of 1 hour of training for 2019 presented on August 1st, 2019, as mandated by Louisiana Revised Statute 17:53. Mr. Foles.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. Do indeed certify that the board members of name did complete the training as presented and required by law.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to our next item, which is approval of the recommendations from the committee as a whole meeting for Business Affairs Administrative held on August 1st, 2019. Mr. Derman, do you have that report for us?
Yes, Ms. Heinz, and it's quite lengthy, so let's get started.
Thank you.
Item A recommends authorization of Superintendent Foles and/or Board President Heinz to purchase the property described as Lot 6A, Square 11, Rouget. Here again, not from that area, Covington versus, okay. Addition, St. Tammany Parish, Louisiana.
I have a motion to accept that purchase of that property, Mr. Hersey, and a second by Mr. Kuzan. Do we have any comments from board members? Any comments from the public? Would everyone please cast their vote? We have 15 yeas. The motion passes.
Thank you.
Mr. Derman?
Next, item B recommends acceptance of Bonnie Cole Elementary School portion of the main building re-roof as substantially complete, subject to architect's recommendations, submission of all regulatory requirements, approval of Superintendent Foles, STPPS project number R0043.
All right, do I have a motion to accept this? Thank you, Mr. Bro. These are the Bonnie Cole. I have a second by Ms. Lamy. Do we have any comments from board members? Any comments from the public? Would everyone please cast their vote? We have 15 yeas. The motion passes.
Thank you. Item C recommends the acceptance of Boyette Junior High School cafeteria roof replacement as substantially complete, subject to architect's recommendations, submission of all regulatory requirements, and approval of Superintendent Foles, STPPS project number R0044.
We have a motion for the Boyette Junior High cafeteria roof replacement by Ms. Page. We have a second from Mr. Hersey. Do we have any comments from board members on that project? Any comments from the public? Would everyone please vote? We have 15 yeas. That motion passes. Mr. Derman?
Thank you. Item D recommends acceptance of Covington High School site improvements as substantially complete, subject to the architect's recommendations, submission of all regulatory requirements, and approval of Superintendent Foles, STPPS project number P0217. I so move.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Derman, and we have a second by Mr. Loop on the Covington High School project. Do we have any questions from board members? Any comments from the public? Would everyone please vote? We have 15 yeas on that motion. Next, Mr. Derman.
Item E recommends acceptance of Fontainebleau High School site work renovations as substantially complete, subject to architect's recommendations, submission of all regulatory requirements, and approval of Superintendent Foles, STPPS project number P0214.
We have a motion by Mr. Betancourt, second by Mr. Harrell on the Fontainebleau High School site work renovations. Do we have any questions from board members? Any questions from anyone in the audience? Would everyone please vote? We have 15 yeas. The motion passes. Mr. Derman?
Thank you. Item F recommends acceptance of Mandeville Elementary School replacement Phase 2 as substantially complete, subject to architect's recommendations, submission of all regulatory requirements, and approval of Superintendent Foltz. STPSB project number R0049.
I have a motion by Mr. Nation and a second by Mr. Green on the Mandeville Elementary roof replacement. Do we have any questions from board members? Do we have any comments from the public? Please vote. We have 15 yeas. Mr. Derman?
Thank you. Item G recommends the acceptance of Mandeville High School, Mandeville High School site improvements 2 and wheelchair lift for Industrial Arts Building as substantially complete, subject to the architect's recommendation, submission of all regulatory requirements, and approval of Superintendent Foltz. STPSB project number P0216.
Motion by Mr. Green and a second by Ms. Drucker on the Mandeville High School site improvements wheelchair lift. Do we have any comments from board members? Any comments from the public? Would everyone please vote? We have 15 yeas on that project. Mr. Derman?
Yes, ma'am. Item H recommends acceptance of Pearl River High School site improvements as substantially complete, subject to the architect's recommendation, submission of all regulatory requirements, and approval of Superintendent Foltz. STPSB project number P0215.
I have a motion by Mr. Winkler, second by Ms. Page on Pearl River High School site improvements. Do we have any comments from board members? Any comments from the public? Would everyone please vote? We have 15 yeas. Mr. Derman, you weren't kidding. It's a long list.
I think we're going for the full alphabet tonight.
All right.
Item I recommends acceptance of Slidell High School roof repairs as substantially complete, subject to architect's recommendations, submission of all regulatory requirements, and approval of Superintendent Foltz. STPSB project number R0056.
I have a recommendation from Mr. Bro and a second from Mr. Kuzan on the Slidell High School roof repairs project. Do we have any questions from board members? Any questions from the public? Would everyone please vote? We have 15 yeas. Mr. Derman?
Item J recommends acceptance of Slidell Junior High School re-roofing as substantially complete, subject to architect's recommendations, submission of all regulatory requirements, and approval of Superintendent Foltz. STPSB project number R0057.
I have a motion by Mr. Bro, second by Mr. Hersey. Do we have any questions from board members? Any comments from the public? Would everyone please vote? $15 yeas. Mr. Derman?
Yes, ma'am. Item K recommends acceptance of the Trane Technology Center meeting center kitchen re-roof and parapet wall cap as substantially complete, subject to architect's recommendations, submission of all regulatory requirements, approval of Superintendent Foltz. STPSB project number R0058.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Green. Do I have a second? Mr. Luke?
And Mr. Bro can say what that parapet thing is.
All right, any questions from board members? Any comments from the public? Would everyone please vote? Mr. Derman?
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Wait, I don't have the, I'm sorry. 15 yeas. Now, Mr.
Okay,
Derman.
thank you. Just a quick break for this particular item. This was held in great discussion in our committee meeting, and I want to publicly thank Superintendent Foles, Mr. Jabby, and Ms. Tipton for getting us all the information that we requested, to the board so that it would help us understand this entire process, so that it gives us a better overview and insight into everything that was discussed. So I definitely want to thank them for all the information that they got out to us. So anyhow, with that being said, item L recommends acceptance of recommendations from the Screening and Evaluation Committee from assignment of firms for large capital improvement projects as listed on the attached memo dated July 31, 2019. And I so move.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Derman and a second. Do we have any comments from board members? Ms. Richardson.
If I may reciprocate Mr. Derman, I do also want to thank Mr. False and his team. Several questions have emerged throughout the week about the large-scale process. And I did have a few questions. I had noticed on the guidelines and procurement document, and I believe also the capital improvement instructions, I noticed that just the modification date on that document was, I think, Monday. And I know we had asked for that guideline to be submitted to us because we're, as he said, trying to understand the process. What edits were made to that document?
It may be that it has a date that just updates when you pull up the document, but I believe that the document, the guideline document, was updated this spring relative to the policy review and the upcoming bond issue.
Okay. And I understand that. I understand how these documents work, and every time you hit save, it does create a new date, a date stamp, if you will. But I just wanted to make sure I understood what edits, if any, were made, because it was said a few times during the meeting that, this was passed, I think you said 1990. So I want to make sure that I have a clear understanding of that date. When I look at the language as I articulated this week in my email, we were looking for a rubric. And indeed, on page 4, there is a rubric. And you guys have done a fantastic job actually taking the numbers and aligning those to the scoring sheets. And so that makes it easy for us to understand. And having recently constructed a building of my own, and some of the white hair that I earned in going through that process, I understand the need to get a good bid. And Mr. Jabbia, I respect you greatly and the statement you did make that, because sometimes we can get so caught up in logistics that we forget we really do want the best vendor possible. With all that said, though, as I really took the time to analyze the scoring tool, I want to just put on the table that there's one important element missing in all of this. In a construction process, we may get 15 bids, and we may pick the lowest one, or in your case, the one with the best score. But I didn't notice anywhere in the scoring document an allocation of the vendor that did the best job with change orders. Change orders are extremely expensive, and the sign of a good vendor is someone who does not have change orders. And I just wanted to know, is that something we keep a record of by vendor? Do we have something that articulates the number of change orders that go through? Because let me tell you, I have lost a lot of money in my own projects in change orders.
Ms. Tipton, why don't you share with the board the process and the policy as it relates to change orders? Because there is a very strict process and policy.
No, thank you.
That's in place that
Right.
people have to go through.
But obviously, a change order has to do with a construction project that has a contractor under contract with the school
Not the
system,
architect.
which is different than selecting the architects itself. But as to your point, the architect creates the drawings and the documents that are used in the bids for the contractor to know the scope of the project, and how well those are scoped and coordinated does contribute greatly to whether there are change orders. And so no set of drawings or documents is perfect. We've certainly learned that over time. But I will say that, that to date, our change order percentage has remained relatively low, and we do keep an eye on that. Also, a change order that comes in, it's scoped by an architect, it's priced by a contractor. When the prices come in, they have to be broken down by law into materials and labor, and it's reviewed by the architect and engineering team completely before it's submitted to our office. And then in our office, it is reviewed again, and we often have questions before we are willing to write a recommendation that would be sent upstairs for Mr. Jabby or Mr. Folse or Mr. Kosei to sign, to go forward with, as a change to a contract.
And isn't there, once it reaches a certain percentage, that it has to go?
Yes, so by law now, if you have change orders that in total add up to 20% or more of the job, then they have to be filed at the courthouse. Or if you have one large change order, that's, I think, 10%.
Right.
So,
If there was a history, though, of change orders, I suppose, I heard you say that the numbers stayed relatively the same. Do you feel that there would be value, though, in adding that to that rubric?
certainly that could be a question that could be asked in the next
Past
time that
history.
we do
Past
this, for
history.
sure.
Okay. Okay, that's very good. And then I think my last, just my last thought is simply this. I heard loud and clear that the people that serve on this committee, they're volunteers, and they give up their time to critique and put on the table before us reliable vendors that we can count on, and I appreciate that. And by the way, Ms. Tipton, you have a thankless job, and I commend you for all the information you provided with us last week, throughout this week, and now today. But as with all of that said, this committee, I just want to encourage our board to consider the thought that ultimately this committee, we need to have oversight over that. And even if one member is present, it really didn't sit well with me when I was like, we really don't know who these people are, and it's confidential. And, you know, we've had these open meetings for these individuals to select the vendors on our behalf, but we really do need to have board oversight in this regard. And because I was completely unaware, and I don't think I was alone in that. So because I am ultimately responsible as a board member for what happens, I just feel strongly that the board needs to be greater, just a little bit greater involvement either in the selection or participation of this committee, if possible. That'll be all.
Thank you, Ms. Richardson. Do we have any other comments from board members? Ms. Lehman?
I just wanted to make a quick comment, and thank y'all again for last week, because I admitted numerous times that I was clueless about the process, and so I appreciate you taking the time to explain. I did walk into a conversation after the meeting, and I heard, I believe it's Mr. Menino, expressing frustration with the board's questions as far as asking like which vendors were, you know, when he was speaking with you, and I walked in on it, about the vendors being in the city and what the purpose was in that, because a lot of our teachers aren't in the city, or our bus drivers don't live in St. Tammany, or things like that. So my only comment is that I know when we interview teachers, if there is a teacher that, and even with administration, even like the ones that were announced tonight, that were appointed, that are in that district, that live in that city, that went to that school, that is given a high consideration, because if we have a teacher interviewing from Hammond and for Slidell School, and we have Slidell teachers, we always give them preference, because we know the likelihood of them sticking with us and staying at that school is much greater. So I just wanted to add that in there, because when we were asking those questions, it wasn't just about that. We do consider that in interviews across the board. So I just wanted to make that comment.
And just in response to that, I'd like to say that local proximity was given the highest number in the rubric, right, 10.
Well, they
Yeah.
all were, but that wasn't my point in this. Maybe I misunderstood. I wasn't talking about that. We understand. I was talking about the frustration that they felt for us asking that question and making a comment that teachers don't live in the district that work here, and bus drivers. I was just making a comment back to that, that we do still give teachers with St. Tammany or Slidell or Covington higher points in interviews for positions. That makes sense?
Well, just let me be clear that I have no frustration with your questions
It
whatsoever.
wasn't you, no,
Okay,
sir,
okay.
not at all. I walked into a conversation after
Okay.
you last time, so I just wanted to make clarification.
Gotcha.
Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Green?
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Hines. I also want to thank Pete and Cameron. I was the one requesting a good bit of this information, and they were very forthcoming with the exact information that I was asking for. So I really appreciate that. I think one thing that we have uncovered in this process is that we do have a good policy. It's just not great. I think that if we could, if anything, if we could evaluate, go back and I'm not suggesting that we do this for these projects, because I think that the way the rubric is set up, each project that we award across those 15 are almost dependent on how we award other projects. So we can't just say, you know what, I'm not real happy with the way this project was awarded, so let's go back to the selection committee there, because we can't do that without having them reevaluate. By the way, we owe a lot of credit and thanks to this selection evaluation committee. By my math, and this is rough, they evaluate over 500 proposals. 15 projects, over 35 proposals per project. There's a lot of qualified architects and engineers out there that want these jobs because we actually pay. So again, thank you all for doing that. Again, I don't think that this process is perfect. I am recommending that we approve the recommendations from the SEC as they are, but what I would like this board to do ultimately, because we do govern the policy, is reevaluate the rubric to remove some of what I would consider subjective elements within it. And again, I think we can clearly define areas of that policy, particularly proximity to St. Tammany Parish, which is one where I've kind of just been hammering on, because if you look at certain jobs, and how the rubric, and gosh, I'm getting so tired of saying the word rubric. You scratch your head over how certain scores could have come about if the rubric were followed objectively. And particularly, I'll point out proximity to St. Tammany Parish. So with that being said, I would like to, again, I'm for recommending or approving what those recommendations are, but I would like, and maybe some work with Trey to really look at that rubric and try to take some of the subjective elements out of it. And then those that are very objective, more clearly define the point scale and how they affect the score within the rubric. Last time I'm saying rubric. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. I was also going to just thank the selection committee and especially our volunteers that sit on that, because it is a lot of work to sit there and go through as we started looking through these numbers and identifying all of the different components that are involved in this process. And like Matt mentioned, over 30 plus contractors on each job and 15, 16 projects. It's a lot to go through, plus all of the other services that are rendered as well with our other professionals. So it's very, very time consuming, and they have to be very dedicated to do this. And there again, want to publicly thank them for their efforts in this. And much of what Matt has said, I totally agree with, and not to be repetitious on that. But Cameron, I want to thank you and Sammy, looking through this data and everything. Y'all have done a great job for us, not just in this project, but over the years of dealing with all of the projects that we've had, and hopefully continue to do even more projects. But it's, as Matt said, I think it would help everybody to redefine some of the criteria so that everybody's, on the same page with it. And but totally appreciate y'all's efforts. It's a very daunting task for everybody to go through, and don't mistake anything I said at the other meeting, because I was truly trying to understand this process, because it is very as we gathered more and more and more information, it really is overwhelming to sit there and just to try to, you know, get a brief snapshot of it to really get a full view of the entire process, not rubric. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Darling. Mr. Nation.
Thank you, Madam President. And again, I echo all the sentiments that have been expressed and in agreement with Mr. Green. And do understand Mrs. Richardson's point. That's well taken about being involved. But I would caution that probably this is where we exercise our oversight rather than getting involved in, you know, in committees. I mean, administrative committees, and that. But just to that point, and this kind of just about 4 quick questions, Ms. Tipton, and these are just kind of areas that some markers for me in terms of the process. The assessment, you know, which is what that is, rubric assessment, you know, it's an assessment. So when was the assessment as it stands now, when was it last revised or edited?
The instructions document for this RFQ.
Right, the rubric, as we're calling it, or I said assessment.
It has evolved over the years, but it would have been most recently put together for this RFQ in May, as
that would have been
the
last
election was
review.
coming together.
Right.
Yes, sir.
And what standards was that assessment? I think you mentioned this the other night, but just remind me again, what standard was that rubric based on?
The guidelines have been in place since the early to mid 1990s. We've used this process since that time for the qualification statements and selection of architects or design professionals. And the form that we use and the evaluation criteria and the rubric or evaluation criteria points are something that have basically been in place but have evolved or been tweaked as we've gone through the years, where we see better or responses that we think we could get better responses to with a different question that may change a little bit, but we work towards those evaluation criteria and asking the questions that get good information for us in understanding the firm and what they can bring to the table for the school system.
Right. But I get, my question is, what standard was is there a standard or that it was based on?
The evaluation criteria, again, that was part of the guidelines.
Or is it just developed in-house?
Yes, sir. And I don't think that that's untypical of what you would find from other owners that go through a process to select design professionals. They would ask the kinds of questions that are in that list of evaluation criteria.
I thought I heard you say that there was like an architectural society or the trade association, that was where I was kind of going. Was there?
We sent the advertisement. This is the request for qualifications is advertised in the official journal, but we also sent that advertisement to American Institute of Architects so that they could, and the Society for Engineers, so that they could send it out to their members if they chose.
Gotcha. And this is kind of a related question, but the criteria that are present in the existing rubric, why were those particular criteria selected?
They are the ones that over the years we've kind of come to as the basic and the ones that we think are very important to get answers to from our experience.
Gotcha. And when you say we, who is we? Just
staff and the committee over time.
Gotcha. All right, great. In the criteria that are in the document as it stands today, why were those criteria weighted the way they are?
Again, that's something that has evolved over the years of using these criteria and putting these forms together.
Okay. And last question, and then in terms of the committee's assessment, what instruction were those, or what instruction has been or is given to those graders, because they're grading an assessment, you know, grading a test, as to they're supposed to grade. I mean, in other words, if that makes sense.
Sure. The forms that they are given and the forms that are filled out by the applicants show those same evaluation criteria and the points. So everybody knows what points are associated with the questions. And we, when we bring these to the committee members, we talk with them verbally about the process, but we also give them a written statement to remind them of some things. For instance, the question about the work that applicant has had with the school system being a reciprocal number. We remind them of things like that. But we mostly encourage everyone to keep in mind that it's important that they do their best to be consistent in the way that they review each criteria and the different applicants' documents, because we may each read things and be looking for different factors within a criteria, but if you're being consistent in the way that you apply that or you review, then the process should work as best it can.
Well, and then that actually begs another question. How do you ensure that consistency? I mean, what's the mechanism by which you ensure that they are being consistent?
These committee members have come from the design and engineering and construction industry. They're familiar with these types of questions and the way the construction process works. So I think that they're qualified to read these and to give consideration to how to grade that.
All right, and here's the last question, and this is going back to the question I asked. So in those instructions, if I'm looking at whatever criteria it might be, and the criteria is irrelevant for this discussion, it's just, criteria A is worth 10 points or whatever it might be. What is the guidance from you, or what's the guidance from us as a system to Joe Grader, the Joe committee member, or Mr. and Mrs. committee member, that how they're supposed to award those points? In other words, like, if it's criteria A and it's 10 points, it at least appears to me, and you correct me if I'm wrong, please, that I can either give those 10 points or not give those 10 points. So there's is there any in between?
I would think that there's definitely in between on every evaluation criteria. And each person has, again, come up with how they're looking at that and be consistent in how they apply that when they're looking at a lot of different firms that have different size staff and other considerations.
And that may be a place where, and I'll close with this, that might be a place where I think we want to take a further look in terms of the rubric, and is what you just said, each person can come up with their own way as long as they're being consistent. I would think we would want, this is just me, and I'm only speaking for myself, we'd want some kind of standard, so some kind of, to get folks in the ballpark, and we can be as tight with that or as loose with that as we want to be. And when I say we would turn that over, to you all to develop that. But so that if I'm grading a paper, I know that if grading this assessment, that I know that if they meet, we'll use the location. If they're in St. Tammany Parish, and I'm just using this as an example, they get 10 points. But if they're 10 miles away, they get 5 points. And if they're zero, if they're 100 miles away, they get 0 points. That's just, I'm throwing that out. Because otherwise, to me, that if we don't do that, it can lead, and we want to avoid any appearance of it leading to any subjectivity, I think that's all. And of course, I think the world of you, and I sang your praises at the committee, all the bond hearings, not bond hearings, the bond presentations that Mr. Foltz' staff and y'all did. And I said there were two unsung heroes in this school system. One of them's you, and one of them's Ms. Prevost, in terms of how the money is managed and how our projects are managed. So anyway, thank you for everything, and thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I only have 15 questions. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Jabier and Ms. Tipton. At the last meeting, we tossed this around a lot. We requested certain information. We were given this information. We each reviewed it, and as I mentioned at the last meeting, these projects have been awarded. And we can always look back and tweak certain things at certain times whenever it's appropriate. And I feel at certain times when we need to retweet something, we can't do that. It's necessary that we go back and review it as we all did. But I think that we can tweet stuff at certain times. And because we tossed this around so much last week, and I think I hope everybody's satisfied with the answers they've received. But I really think the information that was given to us was very professionally done and given to us, Mr. Jabier and Ms. Tipton. So at this particular time, I'd like to call for the question. I'm finished.
I'm sorry, I missed your last. All right, Mr. Kuzan, Ms. Richardson has one more quick question, and then we will take our vote. Ms. Richardson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kuzan. Mr. Nation, I really do appreciate what you had to say. In education, we have this thing when we go and we critique a classroom for observation, we have someone who goes with us. And our scores have to align, and it's a quality assurance that tells us that there's an alignment in the process. And so from time to time, I've been known to do my own analysis on business, and I did take the time to analyze all these scores just to see if I could see variance, if I could see changes and what have you. And yes, there's some opportunity where there's some extreme variance, and it causes one to scratch your head and just say, why is the variance there? This is why, for that very reason, in my email earlier this week, I asked for, do we have record of these things? And it's my understanding that you do not keep these records. Is that correct? The judges, as their
working documents,
the working document. Yeah, that is, in this particular case, that is a concern, because we just, again, as we strive to understand this process and gain reliability, and that's really what it's all about, is reliability in the scoring process. This would be helpful. It would solidify the confidence that we would have in that rubric, if you will. And I just stand behind what Mr. Green has suggested, that we go back, revisit that rubric, and remove the things that are subjective, as well as I would like to have consideration made to the change orders. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Richardson. I know that the administration is open to us having some input into this in the future, so appreciate that. But tonight, we have the recommendation. We have a motion by Mr. Derman and a second by Mr. Loop to accept the recommendations from the Screening and Evaluation Committee for assignment for the large capital improvement projects. So if there are no more questions from board members, I'll ask, are there any questions from members of the public? All right, if not, would everyone please vote? Well, we have 15 yeas. Motion passes. Mr. Derman?
Thank you, Ms. Hines. Item M recommends acceptance of the recommendations from the Screening and Evaluation Committee for assignment of firms for small projects, designer professional services as listed on the attached memo dated July 31st, 2019. I so move.
I'd have a motion by Mr. Derman, second by Mr. Loop. Do we have any comments from board members? Any comments from the public? If not, would everyone please vote? We have 15 yeas. Motion carries. Mr. Derman.
Item N recommends acceptance of the recommendation from the Screening and Evaluation Committee for assignment of firms for technical professional consulting services as listed on the attached memo dated July 31st, 2019. So move.
I have a motion by Mr. Derman, a second by Mr. Hersey. Do we have any comments from board members? Any comments from the public? Would everyone please vote? Mr. Derman?
Yes,
Oh, I'm
ma'am.
sorry. Wait. 15 yeas. Mr. Derman?
Item O recommends acceptance of the bid from Capital One Bank to act as the fiscal agent for the St. Tammany Parish School Board for the period of October 1st, 2019 to September 30th, 2022.
Right, I have a motion to accept, Ms. Page makes that motion, and a second from Ms. Lamy to accept Capital One as the fiscal agent for the school board for the period of October 1st, 2019 to September 30th, 2020. Do we have any, 2022, excuse me. Do we have any questions from board members? Do we have any comments from the public? Would everyone please vote? We have 15 yeas. Motion carries.
The science only got 6 more to go, so just hold
Oh,
tight.
we wouldn't get to see, Mr. Derman.
That concludes our report.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Hines, can I make one quick recognition?
Sure.
Before you, sorry to step in on the agenda, but today, and I'm about to go back here in just a few minutes, back to New Orleans, we had a maritime industry event, annual event that we have every year, and it's people from all over at least this region that are involved in the maritime industry. And I just want to give a shout out to North Shore Community College. Randy, I want to say Savoy, but it's Savoy, but you're talking about Randy Savoy. He was one of the presenters for maritime education, and there was a maritime education panel. He was on the panel along with folks from Houston, San Jacinto College, as well as anyway, it was in Delgado and others. And Randy did an outstanding job, and we should be very proud of our partnership. You know, continue to be partnership with the North Shore Community College. And matter of fact, our school board and our school system, you know, was recognized to this group, because this was a group of about 250 people of maritime leaders from all over the region in terms of the partnership that we have with that maritime program. So anyway, that was what I wanted to say publicly and on the record, the partnership, thanks to the good work that we're doing with them.
Thank you. We do appreciate our North Shore Technical College. All right, that brings us to the end of our meeting, but I'd like to make the following announcements. I don't think this one's a new one to anybody. Tomorrow is the first day of school, August 9th, and we wish you all well. My second announcement is that a public hearing concerning input for the proposed budget for fiscal year 2019-2020 will be held on Thursday, August 22nd at 6 p.m. Board members, you received the budget draft and message in your email yesterday evening, and you have a hard copy at your seat this evening for review. All schools and central office sites will be closed on Monday, September 2nd for the Labor Day holiday. The next committee as a whole meeting will be held on Thursday, September 5th at 6 p.m. The full board meeting will be held on Thursday, September 12th at 7 p.m. And this evening, following this meeting, we have a special meeting to hear an expulsion hearing, which will be held in executive session. Thank you all for being here this evening. Good luck tomorrow, everyone. Meeting adjourned.